What if I told you that before Lucky Luciano, before Al Capone, there was a gangster who ruled Brooklyn with an iron fist, and even Capone called him boss? His name was Frankie Yale. He was powerful, feared, and ruthless, but today, almost no one remembers him. Why? Because in the world of the Mafia, power never lasts, and loyalty can get you killed. In the 1910s and 1920s, Brooklyn was the beating heart of New York's underworld. And standing at the very top was Francesco Iole Better, known as Frankie Yale. He wasn't just a mob boss. He was the prototype for every gangster that came after him. He ran rackets, controlled unions, and even operated nightclubs where movie stars and politicians rubbed shoulders with killers. But his most famous connection was with a young gangster from Chicago, Al Capone. How did Frankie Yale go from neighborhood thug to the man Capone respected as his mentor? And why did the most feared boss in Brooklyn end up riddled with bullets in broad daylight? Well, the answer lies in betrayal, greed, and the first Mafia assassination ever carried out with a machine gun on the streets of New York. Because Frankie Yale's story isn't just about power. It's about how quickly power disappears when your friends decide you're no longer useful. Stick with me, because by the end of this story, you'll see how the Mafia makes kings one day and corpses the next. And if you love Mafia stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Frankie Yale was born Francesco Iole in Calabria, Italy, in 1893. Like thousands of Italian immigrants, his family came to America searching for a better life. Instead, young Frankie found the crowded tenements of Brooklyn, where poverty and crime went hand in hand. By his teens, Frankie was already known on the streets. He had charisma, style, and a violent streak. He joined local gangs, carried knives, and built a reputation as someone you didn't cross. But what set him apart was ambition. Frankie didn't just want to be a street thug, he wanted to be a king. In the 1910s, he started his own crew in Brooklyn. They ran protection rackets, gambling houses, and bootlegging operations. He opened a nightclub called the Harvard Inn, a flashy place where working-class Italians could drink, dance, and gamble. And it was here, inside the Harvard Inn, that a young Brooklyn punk named Alphonse Capone worked as a bouncer. One night, Capone mouthed off to a woman at the bar. Her brother slashed him across the face, leaving Capone with the scars that earned him the nickname Scarface. Frankie Yale was his boss that night. Capone never forgot it. Over the years, Yale became a mentor to Capone, teaching him how to mix charm with brutality, how to run clubs, and how to demand respect. When Capone left for Chicago to work for Johnny Torrio, he carried Frankie Yale's lessons with him. But Frankie wasn't just teaching, he was expanding. By the 1920s, Yale controlled bootlegging routes in Brooklyn, ran truck fleets, and had his hands in everything from gambling to labor unions. He was rich, powerful, and feared. But success in the underworld always paints a target on your back. By the early 1920s, Frankie Yale was one of the most important gangsters in New York. He had the looks of a movie star, always dressed in sharp suits, with slicked back hair and a diamond pinky ring. To the public, he was a nightclub owner. To the underworld, he was Brooklyn's kingpin. He had connections to the Black Hand extortionists, ties to mafia families in Sicily, and deep influence in unions. If you wanted to build, truck, or sell in Brooklyn, Frankie Yale's men showed up at your door. Pay or you got hurt. Simple. But even with all this power, Frankie was still tied to Chicago. When Johnny Torrio and Al Capone needed help, Yale answered. In 1925, when Torrio retired and Capone took over, Yale became Capone's man in New York. When Capone needed imported liquor, Yale's connections brought it in. When Capone needed a hit, Yale supplied the killers. In fact, many historians believe Yale played a role in the murder of Dean O'Banion Capone's Irish rival in Chicago. For a while, it was a perfect partnership. But greed ruins everything. Capone accused Yale of skimming money from his liquor shipments. At first, Yale denied it, but the whispers grew louder. Capone was paranoid, violent, and obsessed with loyalty. And in the Mafia, even a hint of betrayal could be a death sentence. So did Frankie Yale really betray Capone? Or was he just caught in the wrong rumor at the wrong time? We may never know the truth, but what we do know is that Capone believed it, and that belief sealed Yale's fate. On July 1st, 1928, Frankie Yale received a phone call at his ice company in Brooklyn. The caller said his wife was in trouble, possibly kidnapped. Panicked, Yale jumped into his brand new Lincoln coupe and sped off down the streets of Brooklyn. He didn't know it was a trap. As Yale drove, a black sedan pulled up alongside him. Inside were Capone's men from Chicago. One of them leaned out with a Thompson submachine gun, the Tommy gun that would become infamous in gangster lore. They opened fire. Bullets ripped through Yale's car, shattering glass, tearing metal, and hitting Frankie again and again. He lost control, crashed into a stoop, and slumped dead behind the wheel. It was the first time a Tommy gun had ever been used in a New York gangland hit. Newspapers splashed it across their front pages. The once powerful Frankie Yale shot down like a dog in broad daylight. The message was clear: even the biggest bosses weren't safe from betrayal. Frankie Yale was buried in grand style, with a funeral that rivaled royalty. Thousands lined the streets, and floral arrangements filled the church, just like when Dean O'Banion was buried in Chicago 4 years earlier. But unlike Capone or Luciano, Yale's name faded quickly. His empire collapsed, divided among rivals. His protégés moved on. And in the grand history of the Mafia, Yale became just another stepping stone for the men who survived longer. Today, few people outside of Mafia historians remember him. He was the boss who mentored Capone, controlled Brooklyn, and introduced the Tommy gun to New York, but died forgotten. So the next time you hear about Al Capone, remember, before Scarface was a king in Chicago, he was just a kid working for Frankie Yale in Brooklyn. The forgotten boss who learned too late that power in the mob always comes with an expiration date. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more forgotten Mafia tales, because history remembers the winners, but we uncover the losers.